It's astonishing.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
Hello everyone, welcome to ProAV. Thank you very much for joining us. Exciting one today. I'm joined by Craig from Blackmagic, Technical Sales Director for Europe for Blackmagic. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to actually come down and do this with us today, especially after such big launches as these. We really, really do appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. Good to see you. Really excited to see what we can talk about today.
I mean, so today we're going to be talking about the NAB launches that you had, including this lovely beast that's next to me. As we go, by the way, this is very much a Q&A session. We've got slides that obviously we're going to try and get through to explain the products, but if you have any questions throughout, just leave them in the chat. I can bring them up as we go, much like this, and we can steer the conversation in whatever way it needs to go, depending on what you people watching it are interested in. But we're going to cover very quickly everything, but primarily, I think, focus on the more cinematic products today.
If we can.
But it was a huge launch for you guys. Has anyone actually counted how many products
Big
there
show.
were?
I did. Just as
Did
an
it
intro.
take you a while?
A quick scan through. Today I thought as we've spoken about, we'll pick some of the highlights. We'll pick some of the products that are probably easy to talk about today, and then the scope to bring more products back later. We did 14 key announcements in terms of headline products that we spoke about at the show, 56 new hardware products when you add up all the different accessories and all those
the top
elements.
handles.
I mean, but within that there was 3 camera announcements, which are big statements for us, and we'll take a look at those. Within it as well, we have some work we've done around 2110 IP, some new products that we've brought to market to support that. That also includes a new codec. So our approach to how we're going to handle network and 2110.
And we're going to gloss over that today, but it is huge news, and I think it's definitely something that we should find the time to sit down and talk through in depth, hopefully quite soon, because I think that is massive news for you guys. It really, really is. And I sort of feel almost a bit guilty that we're going to gloss over it today, but we will come back, I'm sure, and revisit that in detail.
If people want more information now, Grant did an announcement video for NAB, which is on our website. Now that's over 2 hours. I'm going to try and condense what our CEO did in 2 hours as quickly as I can, but give the detail, and then we can get to the stuff that's in the room. And I think what we do as an approach naturally, and the way I kind of look at this is that we work into the markets that look after live production, post-production, and digital filmmaking, digital cameras. And we announce and build products that answer to those markets and answer to the needs of customers at work. But we're also very much committed to how do we interlink those technologies across those. So 2110 is an example of how that will work, and it's a great sort of stepping stone going forward as to how we integrate them. Maybe just, if I can, jumping into, say, live production first and taking a look at them. Just some of the key announcements we did at the show at NAB. The first one was 2 new ATEM Constellation production switches, ATEM being our core product for live production. And we have a vast range from the ATEM minis that many people will have used recently through to full-scale 4K, 4ME large-scale production switches.
Including the H8 that's running the entire thing for this right now.
Absolutely, and doing a very good job of it, I'm sure. But what we have here is 2 constellations. There's a 1ME and a 2ME. These are the new 4K Ultra HD focused products. They come into our market above the HD constellations, and they're actually almost an exact copy of those, but offering Ultra HD performance. With a 1ME and a 2ME option, obviously there's a scale in there, and you can see in the image, one is a full rack width. They're both 12 gig SDI, so we can do up to 2160p in terms of connectivity and support. The smaller box has 10 inputs. The larger 2ME has 20, so we double the scale. And then likewise, if you look at the tech specs, you'll see that they go 1 DVE in 4 keys in the 1ME, and then 2 DVEs in 8 keys in the 2ME. They all will support USB web output, so they can be used for direct live streaming. We do integrated talkback. We have dedicated multi-viewers built into all of our ATEMs, and we have digital and analog audio controls, and they'll work with all of the control systems we have as well. So really welcomed to sort of fill a gap that we have in the ATEM family with these. And these are shipping now, so these are ready to go if anybody was interested with them at all.
Yep.
Next to that, we introduced the new ATEM micro panel. So this is a much smaller, more compact, independent controller. This can be used with any ATEM product.
I was very excited to see this at the launch.
It's a really cool little concept. So, yeah, we've got larger production panels from 1ME all the way through to 4ME, and the 4ME is obviously looks like something off a Star Trek ship, where it's obviously every button map across all of those. This is designed really to be a lot more smaller, compact to travel with. If you're not using an ATEM Mini but maybe another device, but it would work with ATEM Minis, you could give it to a second control op if you wanted to. Customers I've spoken to from an AV point of view have said it's a brilliant option they could have away from main production control when they're flying projectors or doing tests and setup, but really just designed to be lightweight, compact and portable, as you can see from the design.
And it's the same big tactile buttons as on the HDA and the 4K.
Yeah, absolutely. So the touch, the feel, the quality of the
build
build
is
of
the
it.
important bit, because it sounds like such a silly thing to people that don't day-to-day use these products, but it makes such a difference, those nice buttons.
Rather, ATEM Minis have a slightly different approach, where they're a soft rubber rise
Yeah, because they're portable, we can chuck them in and out of the bag.
Whereas this has that professional edge to it, so you can choose your ATEM in terms of production capability, and then you've got the new micro panel if that's the preferred choice rather than a larger broadcast panel. Internal battery that will last probably about 8 to 10 hours depending on your buttons and your backlighting, what you're doing with it. It's Bluetooth connected as well. So what it will do actually is it will connect to your ATEM software control that then controls your ATEM switcher. So
and you can connect over a cable to bypass, if you don't want Bluetooth, you don't trust Bluetooth, you can just USB.
Then next to that, the last thing's really in live production, just as a kind of quick heads up for people. Our rack mount solutions, really, these are bread and butter products that go into a lot of studio, PPU and studio installs. The audio monitor has had a facelift and a redesign, as has the SmartView 4K. These are really solid products that we sell incredibly well and are really well relied upon and trusted. The key thing here is we've added the 2110 IP capability. So this is the ability to bring in 12 gig SDI over 10 gig Ethernet, and then monitor that through either audio or visually. And then there's some other loop throughs and functions on them as well. The SmartView as a rack-based monitor is fantastic in terms of HDR support. You can add LUTs into it, and then you've got broadcast controls in there as well, like H&V delay or blue only. So really, really high level, well depended upon products that we sell a lot of. The Video Hub, people may be familiar with our Video Hub router products. This is now the largest that we have as a 12 gig. It's a beast of a product. When you look at the actual input and output board on the back, it's a big spread of SDIs, 120 by 120. So it's a full digital matrix. That's any input to any output, however you want to distribute and manage. Clearly designed for large scale. We put these into OB trucks, large studio installations, large AV companies take them.
When you're talking about routing, bigger is always better.
Yeah, and also from my background and my experience when I've built studios and I've worked in scenarios, the router is obviously the point that you want. You bring these, all of your inputs and outputs are managed rather than direct to, say, the switcher and the ATEM. So just an example, a little bit more at the higher end, that's a £10,000 product, but an example of where we're going in terms of those production capable products that we're working with.
Absolutely.
And again, within the live production space initially, but it roots out and connects into many other things, was going back to talking about the IP10 codec. And probably just a small note on this, because it is a very first steps that we're taking with the new IP10 codec. Probably to come back and explain to people more from an applications point of view what it could mean to them. But what we've designed is a new open standard. We've integrated IP 2110 last year as a SMPTE standard that we've adopted into some of the other converter products. This year when we came to NAB, we announced a new open standard. So this is Blackmagic IP10. This is a codec that we're going to be using on our integration and implementation of 2110, but it is something that we're inviting all other manufacturers to be part of. So it's an open standard, so hopefully we'll see other people that can then connect third-party technologies either together or via Blackmagic hardware. It's designed principally to allow us to take 12 gig SDI, so that's 2160p at higher frame rates, into 10 gig Ethernet or network mapping.
And it sounds a bit like a halfway house between the very high quality but high expense 2110 and over IP, and like the NDI sort of more compressed, higher latency, but quite accessible sort of over IP.
Yeah.
Is that right? Sort of place it in the middle of those two?
Yeah, for us, I mean, there's a couple of things that were the driving factors. We wanted low compression, and we wanted high quality. So, you know, the principle being that you shouldn't be compromising that to create the network structures. Cost then becomes the requirement. We want to avoid having high-cost network switches and infrastructure that goes around it. But also, as a video-based company, we wanted to make it plug and play. So the complexities of a network engineering backbone or having to have those kind of individuals on staff add complexity and cost into productions. Yeah. And just as an example, and I won't walk and talk through all of this, but this is a slide that we've used in the explanation of how our codec behaves, in that when we have a 10-bit video input from a 12 gig source, the codec will then process and understand particularly edge detection and understand where it can make some compression savings in that incoming video, process that out in only 8 pixels.
So 8 pixels is the just fixed latency of the codec. That's pretty good.
And then passes it on.
That's pretty good.
The codec only also, if you're using Blackmagic technologies that have the Ethernet and the 10 gig connectivity, the codec only becomes active when you're using 12 gig SDI. So if you are just moving around in HD formats and 6 gig for lower frame rate 2160, you're already within that bandwidth for the Ethernet anyway. So it only applies itself in that 12 gig SDI space, and when it does, it's practically lossless and there's no latency involved at all.
Amazing. Yeah, we should definitely do something to talk through this in more detail.
Yeah. So just to say, I mean, this has now been added to the Blackmagic Studio cameras, to the Ursa broadcast cameras. So if you have those, the new software updates will now give you the codec. So you've got those efficiencies, both in speed, latency, and quality of output. And then just as a quick example, we introduced at NAB just a number of converters that will take 2110 and start to give you some application understanding of what we want to be doing with this technology. So the first one, mini IP to HDMI, allows us to take IP-based video and then take that out to HDMI. So it's a quick solution for monitoring, whether that's in AV, House of Worship AV, whether that's on set. And then the second one there, the mini bidirectional 12G, is a bidirectional converter, input and output, so you can bring SDI in and out. But one example we spoke about at NAB was bringing camera on-set video back to, say, a DIT or a monitoring station. So you've got your SDI input out to 2110, and then you can integrate that in a network solution. The bottom two are optical versions. So if you're not using 10 gig Ethernet, you could be using an optical SFP instead, and then you're increasing your distance of transmission, obviously, over optical. There are other products we're doing. There's a product called presentation converter. We're not,
I remember
not
that.
really going to look at that today. It's a specialist product for presentation and AV, where we can manage laptops, projectors, even ATEM inputs into a, say, a podium speaker's position, with a ton of fantastic tools about how
it
you
looks
manage
very well featured.
Yeah, that would need some time to explain, I think, and sort of allow people to get heads around how really important that product is for a solution.
But very useful for literally this kind of situation where we've got a presentation that is going out onto a stream. Yeah,
and you can some manageable control. And then next to that as well, we're going to bring in, and we have some Ethernet switch control as well. So we're going to build our own network switches. Our approach to these is we want them to behave like video hubs. So again, the control functions, the push button mapping, the ease of adding Ethernet as if it's SDI, and then we bring down all of the complexities as much as possible. So those products are starting to come through. You'll see them being shipping and available through the summer months. I think as we put them together, we can come back and do a conversation about how they can be applied in post, in live production, and maybe in digital film and on set. But they're the stepping stones and the starts for us of as 2110 starts to become a core technology, and then IP10 as our codec. When we have got people signed up to that and they're part of the program with us, we can come back and we can talk about what those are and third-party solutions that will integrate as well.
Sounds great.
So, jumping into post-production.
Resolve.
DaVinci Resolve. Everybody now kind of knows when NAB time comes around, the likelihood of a new version of DaVinci Resolve is quite high. And it always seems like the guys that are developing and work on Resolve just don't stop. Another 100 new features built into the product.
Just before we get too into Resolve, here to records, just put a little question up on the 2110 stuff. Quite the lineup of new gear released at NAB. How long has all these 2110 items been in development? Interesting question.
Well, we announced the original 2110 3x3 gig converter last year at NAB. That was our first products coming directly in. We've also got 2110 in some of the Decklink products in the IP conversion range. But in terms of our 2110 development codec, it's 12 to 18 months in terms of what we've been working on those products. IP10 has followed feedback and understanding and getting a feedback from the market as well, and talking to customers both at enterprise, broadcast and national level, down to AV introduction, and trying to understand how people want to use IP, but what are the problems we can solve, those complexities, those costs, those infrastructure issues. So yeah, in answer to the question, over the past couple of years, as we've decided and we know that we needed to make a directional change or step into the IP world, that 2110 was the way we were going to go, and then our implementation from that followed.
Fantastic.
Okay, so yeah, quickly with Resolve, beta version is available now if people want to download and try it. Don't install it if you're working on projects. It is beta software. It will let you down. So if you're working on something important, stay on 18 for now. But if you want to test it and try it, what's at the core of this is a lot of our new AI technologies. So Resolve has had a neural engine, as we've called it, built in for many versions now, which help us do a lot of machine learning, a lot of processing tasks in the background. And some of the key ones that we showed at NAB were things like IntelliTrack. So this can actually, as a tracking tool, identify objects, faces, people within frame and give you a much better tracking solution if you're grading, for example. One of the really cool things it can do, though, is it can now understand audio in frame. So it can track audio sources in frame and do things like automatic panning. So if you wanted to create those kind of effects, you can use the IntelliTrack system for it. There actually was quite a number of Fairlight audio tools added as well. There's a new Ducker tool. So this will, again, allow you to process audio and then quickly rebalance audio. If you've got background audio tracks, you can duck them as your dialogue comes on top. A music remixer, which I think is a really cool tool. So that will give you, if you've got a music source, it will identify independent vocal and instrumental elements and allow you to adjust and remix. So if you wanted to make a non-vocal track of a particular song you were using, you could bring that in, or you could use the Ducker tool to take the vocals away.
I can really see myself using that a lot because, in background, in videos, you often don't want anything with vocals in it, and it just opens up the amount of music that you can use massively. Yeah. Because I can just take the vocals out. I mean,
and both of those, the Ducker and the remixing tools, automate a lot of things you could do in Fairlight.
Yes.
Very quickly.
Yes, because I'm sure you could have done that in Fairlight already. It's just that I probably couldn't because I'm not an audio engineer. Yeah.
So really, really great ones in terms of Fairlight and the audio and digital audio controls you've got in there. Within the grading tools as well, Color Slice Vector, new tool which then separates your color vector channels, so you can then play and move around in those without any kind of spill into other areas. So it gives you very fine control with some very quick, intuitive UI in terms of it. There's a couple of really cool cinema or digital filmmaker tools in there. There's a defocus background tool. So again, using AI, it can understand foreground and background like the mask systems that we've had in the past. And if you wanted to increase or decrease or play around with the bokeh elements in a frame, you could do that as well, or maybe balance out shots if you've got a varying focal depth from you didn't notice on the day. And then there's a new tool in there called Film Look Creator. So this allows you to create very complex film looks, classics maybe like a bleach bypass, quickly inside the UI as well. And those are really just worth playing around with and being creative with. We build the tool and then you make it look what you want to.
Fantastic.
So that's available now. We'll have the full version as soon as possible, probably through the end of the summer. Next to that, we also announced a lot of new updates inside of Blackmagic Cloud. So Blackmagic Cloud's been with us now for a few years. It's been through beta processes. It's been tried and stress tested with multiple agencies, high-end studios and production houses have been working with, small independent groups of all sorts of scales. And it's now in a position where we've introduced things like organizations. This is really cool. So what you can now do is you can start to organize who's working on your projects with you, rather than being maybe small groups or independent connections between people. In collaborative workflows, you can bring in larger groups, you can allocate people jobs, you can hide work from people that don't need to be involved in certain projects, rather than it being a completely open book. You can now add licenses through Blackmagic Cloud. So if you needed to rent a license to bring in some extra work, you can do that rather than having to purchase. It's a little bit more expensive, than buying a license, but it means you can have some short-term solutions if you're working on projects as well. And a really key one for us is now the ability to sync from Cloud Store hardwares and Blackmagic Cloud Store. So our online storage tools and our hardware tools will work connected and synced to give you a much greater interoperability in how all those things work. So those are all up and running. There's more things we're going to bring to Blackmagic Cloud through the year, so keep an eye on those. If you haven't tried it, go to the front page of the website, little icon, little blue and white cloud, log in, see how it works. The information there about pricing, all of it is try as you buy. So if you don't want to use it, you can just remove the projects. It's not subscription based, so you're not locked into these things. And then if you're working in collaborative, or even I know people that collaborate with themselves, as in they would do their work on the desktop. When they're traveling on a MacBook or an iPad, they link their cloud projects to their mobile devices, and they'll work on the train, they'll work overseas, come home. So there's some brilliant ways you can sort of use Blackmagic Cloud as well.
Super cool. Before we get onto the hardware, a couple of questions on some of the live production stuff again. Alamok says, what is the exact delay using the 2110 IP stuff at NAB? There was a lot of we're hoping for. You said 8 pixels, so does that mean 8 frames a second delay on the IP codec?
No, input to output would be 8 pixels in terms of process, so the delay would be unnoticeable.
Fantastic. Here to Record says, regarding the USB-C multi-view output option coming to the ATEM Mini Extreme for instant replay, can we expect that feature added to the entire ATEM lineup?
Very much TBC. Yep. So we haven't looked at the instant replay and the Resolve replay tools today. They're a very in-depth product. They're probably going to arrive with us later in the summer. So again, we made the decision today, we won't look at that as a particular product. In terms of how that technology will then filter down through the rest of the ATEM family, we're always keen to share technologies, certainly things that customers will see benefits from. I think that's probably a TBC, and when we know more, we can say more.
Fair enough. A Real Child Vision says, will the Film Look creator house the Codec 2383 Fujifilm and Fujifilm in future updates? Also, would be cool to develop a more FPE and house in the Film Look creator in future updates. I'm not entirely sure what that means. But basically, more. Do you think more film stocks are going to be added to it, like Codec and Fuji stocks?
Most likely, yeah. As we have done, added colour space and film stock examples inside of Resolve for colour space.
Yep.
They will trickle down. So as we go through beta, certainly if people have got preferences, you can add some notes into the forum. The product managers will be looking at things like that. We can promote and ask for certain things as well. But certainly growing the usability of that new tool would be exactly what we'd want.
Exactly. Lovely stuff.
Cool. Okay. Maybe moving on for post-production is the box we have here. So the new micro color panel, and I have one here which is fresh out the factory. So this is the new micro color panels. It's a redesign.
I mean, it's so thin and light. Look at that.
And, I mean, it is. And it's fantastically well engineered in terms of the control and the precision and the button design and everything. We looked at what the original micro panel offered people and wanted to make something that was lighter, more precise, gave more button controls, map more of it to DaVinci Resolve. So without going through the detail of everything here, because again, there's more information online.
There's a lot of buttons there.
It's a very comprehensive control system where you've got shifts for around, for multiplying the actual controls you can see by 2 layers. Obviously, classic 3-layer track and ball control on it as well. But what we believe to be really cool with it is you've got Bluetooth connectivity. We have this then really as well designed for iPad. So there's a slot across the back. You might be using this traditionally with DaVinci Resolve on your main workstation with your laptop traveling.
Yeah, I mean, that's important to get across, I think, isn't it? This is not an iPad-only control. This isn't the control panel for iPad and that's it.
No, it's a redesign of the micro control system to improve that smaller unit, to give you much more control and much more tactile button interface with Resolve, whether that's desktop or laptop. But then thinking about DaVinci Resolve on the iPad, and that's software that we've had now for a few years, and the uptake on this has been phenomenal in terms of the number of people using it. And specifically creating something that is as neat and as compact as that. So you could be working again in the field on set, you could be, that could be your principal main use of Resolve if you wanted it to be. And building a panel that then allows you to do it. We've done another couple of things as well. So this is the English version. If you happen to prefer and want it in Italian, in French, in German, we do language versions now.
Cool.
So maybe you won't sell as many German ones as some of our continental friends, but we've got some options so that you're not having to just have buttons that are not in your native language. And
that's fantastic.
And they're all shipping and products in stock now.
Couple more questions. Alan Mock says, will the Film Look Creator be opened to look or film stock presets from external downloadable files? And that's just LUTs, right? I mean,
probably.
Basically, can other people make film stocks to go into the Film Look Creator?
Don't know, if I'm being honest on that.
Sure. G&K Studio says, color slice is insane. That feature quietly made my life so much easier with the skin tone feature. Absolutely. That skin tone feature looked fantastic in it. And Seth says, a question about organizations. I work at a university where we teach Resolve. How can I easily manage Resolve Studio licenses on our computer labs using organizations? So can it do the actual studio licenses, or can it just do the cloud stuff? It's just the cloud stuff, right?
It will allow you to manage projects and access in terms of you can bring in named accounts. So as Blackmagic Cloud works, when you share your project libraries and you create that collaborative setup inside of Blackmagic Cloud, each user needs a Blackmagic Cloud account. So you collect those in and then you give people access to the projects. You can create teams, if you will, and then you can see in the organization's UI who is actually part of those groups. You can distribute licenses that are paid for through Blackmagic Cloud. What we can't do currently is add existing licenses that you might have on a dongle or an activation code into your cloud account.
Gotcha.
So that's something different. That would be a network license management system. We don't currently have that capability. So you can manage the access and create teams, organize projects a lot more robustly, giving access or removing accounts. But in terms of license management, there's a sort of a stepping stone towards having more license control.
Cool. Okay, gotcha. Lovely stuff. Okay.
Right. So look, that's a quick preamble, as quickly as we could, through some of the products I think were probably the most interesting today.
Yep.
But what we know is the most interesting thing is cameras.
This big bad boy here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, firstly, thank you for bringing this actually physically down so that we can see one. There's not many of these kicking around, is there? And for full disclosure, this is quite an early prototype of this.
So pre-production build. This is one of the cameras we had on booth at NAB. So buttons that don't exactly do what they're supposed to right now. Software
and you can't record onto it, right? So this is
blank media that's in there right now. But yeah, the only unit we have in Europe. The rest all went back home to Las Vegas, from Las Vegas to Melbourne. And the product is back in development in the factory, hopefully out and about soon.
And a question that would make sense to bring up now is from McNeil Bell. I came here to find out, when is that beautiful Ursa Cine 12K going to be in stores or available to order? How long do we have to wait?
This month.
This month?
This month. Our announcement was for it to be in May. My understanding is product is going into factory. Volume, I don't know.
Sure.
I won't promise ETAs, but obviously speak to you guys at ProAV and keep them informed.
I mean, so pre-orders are open at ProAV. I will put the links to pre-order into the chat now. So Cine pre-orders. And as is the Pyxis as well that we're going to talk through as well.
Just as a quick aside before we get into Ursa Cine, I just wanted to mention something that was a bit of a secret surprise that we did at NAB as well. So we've had the Blackmagic Camera App for a while. Many people have used this. If you haven't, we designed this with Apple for iPhone 15 for the Pro, and it will work on other iPhones all the way back to, I think, iPhone 11s, as long as you can run iOS 16. And the Blackmagic Camera App allows you to use the software tools and our UI that you'll find on all of our cameras around Blackmagic OS inside of your iPhone. It gives you more professional control and access to cinematic tools for filmmakers on your mobile phone. So if you're a young filmmaker and you're starting to get into what it is to be in this world, this is a fantastic tool. It's a free software you can download and try, or it can be used to creatively add additional cameras to any production. You can shoot in log modes, you can shoot in ProRes RAW. It supports camera to cloud for DaVinci Resolve workflows. I've used some of the moment lenses, so you can get rigs and clips that obviously can put anamorphic modes into the camera, which is crazy to think you can do that with a smartphone. And it just creates a lot more capability in the camera in terms of control that you wouldn't have on an iPhone normally.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a huge amount of accessories around iPhones now since the 15. Like Tilta have launched their new rigs at NAB. There's Condor Blue making some amazing iPhone accessories, as in hardware to go around it. And this is a fantastic, and it's free as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Then what we've announced, and you'll see from the logo on the screen, is we were showing this working with Android for the first time.
Yep.
So clearly not everybody in the world wants iPhone. There's a lot of Android users out there. So we were showing that we have built the Blackmagic Camera App for Android. You have the cloud capability. We were showing it doing connections into DaVinci Resolve and working. It's not publicly available. It's one of these that watch this space, and when we know it's ready, we'll put it out into the world.
You only had it working on a couple of phones, right?
Yeah, we had it on a Samsung Galaxy S24 and a Pixel 8 Pro, the Google phone.
Gotcha.
The difference being with iPhone and iOS, it's a very closed island. So from a development support point of view, it's one flavor, so to speak. When you get into Android, Samsung, Google, and others will have different hardware and different implementations. So we might be a little bit more selective with the phones and the hardware that we can support, but we are bringing it to Android as soon as we can.
Peter has asked, are there any plans to offer Blackmagic RAW on the iPhone app? Is it even technically possible?
Good question. Technically possible? Yes.
Okay.
Blackmagic RAW works by us profiling the sensor of the camera that we're recording onto. So one of the key technologies that we know that we use in Blackmagic RAW is it understands the camera independently. Other codecs are the same codec, whatever camera you're working on. Could we add it in? Possibly. That would be a conversation with Apple as to if they want us to be involved in that hardware layer. But from a codec and a development point of view, possible. Likely, not sure.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not what the tool is primarily used for. You know, I don't think anyone is swapping their pocket camera, for example, for one of these. I think this is an extra string in people's toolkit rather than a sort of first cinema camera or something like that.
I've seen it used we've done work with graduate filmmakers and guys that are still at film school. If I had something like this when I was at film school rather than VHS cameras, it would have been amazing. But they are brilliant to learn composition, movement, exposure, just understanding how you can create motion and action or whatever else you're studying inside of the filmmaking skills. They're a brilliant first step. I've also worked with production agencies that have used them for things like recce's, VFX shots, grabbing quick kind of background plates. I've also known people just using iPhones as secondary cameras hidden on set. Again, because you can shoot in ProRes, you can shoot in log, very high quality images can be taken off it, and then you've got the Blackmagic Resolve workflows off the back of it as well. So it's really us working with Apple and now with Android to give you another idea. And the best camera is often the one that you've got in your pocket. So we've added our technologies into that technology.
Fantastic. From one extreme to the next, right?
Very much so. Yeah, from free software to the most expensive camera and the most technically advanced camera we've ever announced, which is the Ursa Cine 12K, which is the paramount product, the cumulative finish of all the work we've done since we announced our first cinema camera at NAB 12 years ago. If people remember the cinema camera 2.5K. This camera is packed with a lot of features and technologies that we know people have been asking for. We've really worked to design the ultimate digital filmmaking tool that we could. principally built around our most advanced sensor as well. So this is a camera that has a 12K capable open gate sensor. It's a full frame system, and it's an RGB based sensor as well, which we will talk about the advantages of it.
Yes, now this RGB sensor technology, we saw this on your previous 12K, Ursa Mini Pro 12K. And so this is the second sort of camera generation to be using that. But I think I would encourage people not to think of this as sort of a 12K Mark II or something like that. This is very much a new camera platform. I mean, everything about this is so different in terms of the way it's being thought out. And of course, with it moving to full frame, it's a whole new sensor. You know, it might be using some of the same theoretical technology, but it must be entirely new silicon chip.
It is. We tore the old camera down. Our industrial design team based in Melbourne, where all of these concepts become reality, looked at every element, down to screws, down to heatsink, everything that we could. Grant's mission with this camera, our CEO, and he said this himself, was to build the ultimate camera that we wanted.
Which is a fun mission.
Yeah, and to build something which is really where we want to go as a digital filmmaking company, you know, and onwards, you know. Everything was reconsidered. So yes, we had a 12K camera. Last year we did a version with an optical low pass filter, which was built on feedback from production studios, principally guys like Netflix that we'd worked with. They were the foundation, if you will. This is a different camera. It's not the same sensor and a different body. It's a redesign of everything.
And there's so much here. I mean, the 12K gets the headlines because you know it's in the camera's name. It's an attention grabbing spec. Even if you just stick your blinkers on and completely ignore the fact that this camera is 12K, there is so much here to get excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you take a look at the sensor first of all, in terms of what we're building, the example here, it's 30% larger in terms of its capability, its performance. It takes you into that full frame space in terms of lenses and working in higher end digital filmmaking. The sensor is new. We can talk about, I'll show you in a second, we'll get into some of the performance capability of the camera before we look at the hardware. But in terms of actual resolution, yes, it's 12K, but this camera is not going to just be a 12K camera. We understand people might have been put off on the first version by that number. It's, you know...
Well, I mean, put off is a really interesting way to put it because, I mean, yes, it's technology a leap forwards, but I've heard from customers time and time again, I don't need 12K. What do I need 12K for? I don't want 12K. There are customers out there who do, you know, the ones that always get talked about, the visual effects plates, that kind of stuff. There's definitely a crowd out there that likes the more resolution they can get. If you gave them a 20K camera, they'd probably be very happy. Yeah. The average person using one of these probably doesn't really care that much about the difference between 8K and 12K.
Yeah. I think for us, what we've learned and understood is what's the applicational use. So the camera will shoot 12K. We see that principally being used in specialist environments, photogrammetry, VFX plates, where the resolution is important. We've worked with natural history and wildlife documentary and TV companies where 12K gives them massive scope and scale across landscapes, or simple things like birds of prey in the air. Rather than having to try and track inside of a smaller frame, they can leave it wide and then they can pan and scan in post.
This is a great camera for that. Because of the frame rates we're going to talk about in a minute, there's this new 9K Super 35 crop mode as well to get even more punch in or work with those really long lenses. You know, that with the extra resolution, this is such a compelling camera.
It is, absolutely. And then if you drop into 8K, that's where we've seen the camera being used in digital filmmaking, where 8K is a standard that people want to shoot towards. And then if you're working in 4K, we're more in DCI, we're more in high-end television mode.
And this is one of the main benefits of this sensor technology, is that you can drop down that resolution without having to crop in. Ordinarily on a Debaya CMOS sensor, if you were shooting in RAW and you wanted to crop in from 12K to 8K to 4K, you would have to be punching right in and end up at probably like a Super 16 by the time you went down to 4K. Not the case here, right? No. I mean, and how does the quality look when you're dropping down like that? Because it's not downsampling, it's a completely different way of doing it, because it's a completely different sensor, right? As far as I understand it, it is effectively line skipping, but without the disadvantages of line skipping as we know it. So that's a sort of dirty word. Yeah,
it doesn't line skip. There's no pixel binning.
Okay.
There is what we call in-sensor scaling.
Okay.
So if you were shooting in 12K and you understand the field of view of the lenses you're working with. When you go into the 8K mode, you still get full width and full height. So your field of view and your focal length to your lens is not affected. So there's no crop. Likewise, when you go down to 4K, which would be significant compared to a 12K output, we take that full information from the sensor and we scan it through and then scale it through in-camera processing. So there's FPGAs.
Okay, so it is more similar to a downsample.
It's a process, yeah. Rather than you could either crop, where pixel-to-pixel mapping would be accurate to the resolution you want, but you would have an optical focal change, so your lens and focal distances would be affected, or you could line skip and pixel bin, which then changes your resolution outputs and your detail processing. We don't do that. There's a scaling processor. There's a way in which we then try and retain that fidelity through every resolution.
You're able to do that incredibly fast because of the frame rates that this thing can do.
And that's where this camera, I think, sets us apart. So a lot of information on this table, but to give you an example, the camera can shoot 12K resolution. It's a full format system, so we've got an open gate option, 3:2 in terms of height and ratio. We can shoot at that ratio at 80 frames a second. And it will do that at 12 milliseconds.
Which is fantastic. That's fantastic. For something that is large format like this, you know, that's up at sort of Sony Venice levels of rolling shutter performance, let alone the sort of 8K and 4K ones as we go down that list. This is really quite good. In fact, we had a question. Let me just scroll back a little bit on the questions. I can see the questions coming in thick and fast, by the way. I am going to try and get around to most of them when they drop into the conversation naturally. But Alamok said, the sensor readout speed on the Cine 12K is rolling shutter fixed on the new spare no expense camera. I guess what they're trying to imply there is, you know, if this is your spare no expense camera, perfect camera, why is it a rolling shutter rather than a global shutter? I guess is the direction they're going there.
There's a couple of ways of looking at it. We have had global shutters. Some of our earlier production 4K cameras, the earlier Ursa 4K cameras used a global shutter. That you trade off sensitivity, dynamic range with a global shutter. Where we've taken roller shutter or rolling shutter with this camera is that when you pair that with the RGB and non-Bayer based technologies, we can do different things. We can work with FPGAs in the camera from processing, the way that we do line readout, and the way that the sensor behaves within that image processing pipeline means we can get rolling shutter speeds at high frame rate and high resolution, and it's RGB. So that's the other thing. When we're talking RGB, we're talking that Bayer systems obviously have a CFA, a colour filter array, based around the Bayer standard and the mosaic used. This is RGB in that red, green and blue channels are 1:1:1 sampled, so that we have pure colour reproduction and fidelity in what we're sampling. And then also we have what we call W pixels, or white, and they're our luminance track. So our dynamic range is higher as well in this camera at 16 stops because we've got these luminance and W pixels in there. You put all of that together and we're able to achieve a camera which can shoot high resolution, high frame rate, fast readout, and RGB colour fidelity. This is why, again, this is the greatest camera that we've made, geared towards how do you get the best image off a sensor without compromising it through the camera processing.
Absolutely, and I would take those advantages like the dynamic range and the frame rates over the difference between, you know, looking there, 8K, 17:9, 180 frames a second. That's sort of a real sweet spot there on that list for me. That's 5 milliseconds. You know, that's negligible. And I would like to see it side by side with a global shutter to see which one actually, in terms of fast panning, fast moving, was actually more appealing. You know, I'm not certain that a global shutter would look more appealing rather than better. Over 5 milliseconds rolling shutter.
And then naturally, rolling shutter is entirely dependent on environmental of what you're shooting as well. Motion in frame or motion off frame. So again, when these things start to become this quick and we have that capability versus global, I think the difference might be negligible. But where we've gone in the technologies that we've developed for this camera is that we've gone down the route of making rolling shutter as quick and as efficient as we can within inside of those requirements of higher frame rate, high resolution, high colour fidelity. The speed out reads are a an outcome of the technologies we've delivered in the sensor for those image quality output, not necessarily something that we aimed for. We didn't try and build a fast rolling shutter. They're a consequence of other technologies that we've added into the sensor design. And as you say as well, if you look at the table, there's a lot of information there, but that's where I feel the sweet spot is as well, 8K and 4K at 17:9.
So he's come back saying Fix was not mean-spirited. More, if technology reached a point where the Ursa 12K would not be dismissed due to jello effect compared to a Sony or an Arri. I mean, that is what it all comes down to. This is better rolling shutter numbers than Sony or Arri. You know, this is certainly comparable with Alexis and Venice's. Off the top of my head, I think it's lower rolling shutter, which is remarkable. Remarkable from a camera company from Blackmagic, but from a camera that costs what this does as well. Because yes, this is the most expensive camera that you guys have made, but compared to an Arri Alexa or whatever, this is not that kind of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not massively familiar with what the technologies of those cameras make. They make fantastic cameras, and we know the quality that they produce. This is our attempt to build a camera, as I say, which is the best digital filmmaking tool we can give. And that's everything from color fidelity, high frame rates, high resolution, cloud camera workflows, DaVinci Resolve, and what you can deliver from that. The readout speeds, and I think the question and the statement is fair, as in this camera is working at the level of expectation that many people would have in terms of the performance of a rolling shutter when there are global shutter options available to them instead.
Exactly. And let's just talk about these frame rates as well, because I don't want that to be something that we gloss over, because I mean, that's a huge selling point. I mean, 12K open gate up to 80 frames a second. Sure, that's a nice little bit of slow motion. The 17:9, which is probably what most people would use the 12K in, up to 100 frames a second, and scale that down to 8K or 4K 17:9, and it's 180 frames a second. Those are some really punchy frame rates.
Very, very usable. Whether that's for creative interpretation, whether that's motor or sports, or whether that's typically where I've worked in productions for high frame rates has been action or fight scenes.
Sure.
So you want that motion captured in frame, so then you've got choices in post. Very, very usable. And like we said as well, talking about natural history, shooting at 12K 2.4 to 120 frames per second, you get both. You get high resolution, so then you've got pixels to work with for pan and scan, delivery to HD or 4K television at high frame rate as well.
And 7 milliseconds readout, so when you're panning across the cheetah as it's running in the Sahara, it's going to look good still.
And I think another one that's worth noting, the D-squeeze options for anamorphic, they apply openly to all formats.
Which is a small thing, in my opinion, should be there on all of your cameras.
But hasn't been
but
an
it
option.
hasn't been.
One other thing just to talk about in terms of formats before we look at the camera is there is a 9K mode that we spoke about. So when you shoot 12K, 8K, 4K, I said that you get full width and height of the sensor because of the in-camera scaling. The 9K mode is a crop. And the technical details are on the website to specifically what that means. But we've added this as a Super 35 mode. So if you're working with either anamorphic or spherical Super 35 lenses,
which incidentally is what I've got here. I've got a DZO Pavo, which is a Super 35 anamorphic 2x mode. So I've got the camera in the 9K pixel mode.
And then you can match that. And likewise, if you were shooting to celluloid, if you're working, you've got a format and resolution or aspect ratio readout where you can match to 4, 3, or 2 perf. So you'd have the same lensing choices as well if you're matching. And then the bottom one is for 6:5 anamorphic, 4 perf equivalent. Again, you're still getting 100 frames a second in terms of what the support would be. So
really, very cool.
So that's the physical capability of the sensor, which is, with every camera, it's the heart of what the product would be, the performance of it. And then
so before we start talking about the body, shall I go over some of the questions on more of the tech specs? Firstly, just a really nice comment from Rec Media saying, congrats on a super successful NAB. Just wanted to say I'm loving the direction of the recent products being announced from Blackmagic.
Thank you very much.
Which is very nice. Okay, so there's a couple of questions about good old ProRes. Michael says, what codecs ProRes can we record? And I saw another one as well, James, saying, do you plan on introducing ProRes into any of these new cameras, or is that something you are leaving behind? What's the verdict on ProRes?
No ProRes in these cameras.
Blackmagic RAW only, right?
Blackmagic RAW, as you've seen recently in pocket cameras, Cinema Camera 6K, Ursa Cine, and we'll talk about Pyxis. For us, Blackmagic RAW as not necessarily as a proprietary codec, but as a technology that we can integrate between camera and post. So there's a video on our website if you want more details around it, where Grant explains how it works. And we've done certain workshops over the past couple of years about Blackmagic RAW. I think even our guys have come on this show to talk about it.
Yeah, we did a fantastic live stream with Simon talking about the advantages of Pro. Or was it Mikhail? And the thing that I think a lot of people don't realise is that Blackmagic RAW can be significantly smaller and less resource intensive than ProRes can be. You know, it plays back smoother and it's smaller data rates for the same resolutions.
And it allows us, as I said, with the camera app, as a little side comment, we profile the sensor. So each application and implementation of Blackmagic RAW is customized to the camera. You also see this, and Mikhail previously spoke about it with Video Assist. We can take the Video Assist products onto third-party cameras, and we've worked with camera manufacturers, profiled their sensors, and then built capability in Blackmagic RAW to optimize that camera's performance. We can't do that with other technologies. And then when you take that, as you say, the workflow back into DaVinci Resolve, our ability to demosaic and work at speed and get color reproduction accurately in DaVinci Resolve is better for us through that image pipeline that we manage. Blackmagic RAW, if you want, in a very basic term, is almost like taking some of Resolve's technology from color management into the camera.
Which was kind of the whole original idea of your very first camera. If I remember Grant releasing that camera, that was kind of the point, was it was almost an accessory to Resolve.
It was, and back in the day using Cinema DNG, which was a bucket of pixels, we wanted just pure sensor dump and readout, and we'll deal with it in Resolve. What we've done over the years is we've taken that thinking through the camera, from Blackmagic Resolve into Blackmagic RAW, now to a point where we design and develop our own sensors. So you've got, we're the only manufacturer in the digital filmmaking space that can give you a technology in a single pipeline from sensor to master grade.
Very cool. McNeil is saying, so is the 12K open gate 3x2 equivalent to 5 perf? Now, I don't know film at all. Do you know that? I
don't know that, no.
Fair
I'd
enough.
have to check the resolutions.
Yeah, the perf comparisons on there were for the 9K, weren't they? Anything else here on... There's some on control and stuff, but we're going to get on to that in a second. Oh, what is the sensor to SDI delay on the Cine 12K? Now, that's a very specific thing.
It hasn't been tested, actually. Usually it could be a frame, but we'd have to test and check that.
Fair enough. Right, I think a lot of the other questions are to do with physical attributes, so let's move on, shall we?
So in terms of the physical and the camera, a quick kind of whistle stop around it for those that are unfamiliar with what we've designed. It's a brand new body, as I said, complete re-engineered. The camera is EF, PL, and there will be an L mount option in terms of the lens mount that you can put on the product.
And that is interchangeable on this? Yeah,
so I've got the EF mount here. So if you buy the camera, it will come in a Peli case. It will come with the kit and the rig that you can see, top handles. And we have a new base plate system as well, with 15mm and 19mm rod options. It will come with PL fitted as standard, and you'll get an EF, actually a lockable EF option that you can put on.
And now, you get that in the box?
In the box, yeah. The L mount option will come later, and we're looking at a Hasselblad mount option as well in the future. And we'll look at what that means. This is actually a new universal mount system, so we actually shim to the mount. So usually when you change out your mount, you might need to shim to the camera body, which can be a bit slow, maybe even a tedious process. But now we shim to the actual mount itself. So with 4 screws, you can quickly change between PL and EF, and then have a fast turnaround in terms of camera setup.
Seth has just said L mount or LPL mount. It's LPL. Right?
LPL, sorry.
LPL, yes.
Too many mount options.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that might be something that people might be sitting there thinking at home is well, you know, L mount. You've done it on the Cinema 6K. You've done it on the new Pyxis that we'll talk about in a minute. Why no L mount on this?
Yeah, sorry, good correction. LPL. L mount is too shallow.
Yes.
As a flange focal distance to actually fit the new universal mounting, so we can't actually achieve what we'd need to with an L mount.
And I don't believe you've ever put ND filters behind an L mount, have you? So I imagine like that takes some doing, getting ND filters and a large format sensor
in those
very
spaces.
shallow.
Yep.
Not saying it can't be done. We've seen it being done on the Burano, for example, from Sony. There are cameras that are doing it, but you know, I don't think Blackmagic has ever done that yet.
Not as yet, no. We do have ND filters in the camera for this.
Yes.
Obviously, again, with a true glass and IR cut rotary mechanism built into the camera. If you're familiar with the Blackmagic products, you'll be familiar with the production side, where all your button mappings and all of the monitor side. The screen is now fully articulated, so it will rotate and push back into the body, which small thing, but something that we've not had available on the cameras previously. Then probably jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the things to probably look at on that side of the camera is the new Blackmagic media modules.
Yes.
So this is quite a different take as well in terms of what we've offered on cameras previously. We've decided for the first time with our cameras to build a proprietary media system. So these are using NVMe media, M.2 in a customized housing that goes into the Ursa Cine body. The camera will come with an 8 terabyte media module and allow you to record all the way up to 12K open gate at those frame rates you saw. The reason we've added this technology to this camera is we're starting to outpace third-party media. One of the common complaints that I think camera manufacturers get, not just ourselves, is that the reliability or qualified lists of technology that you can use in terms of higher frame rate or higher resolution recording. So this will allow us to record, I think it's up to 6 gigabit a second capability in the camera. And
again, you get one of these included with the camera.
Yeah. Now, if you're recording 12K, I think if I remember right, there's a calculator on the product website for the Ursa Mini products. If you record 12K at 2.4 to 1 DCI at Blackmagic RAW 5 to 1, it's about 5 hours of recording. If you do 8K in the same format, you'll get 11 hours of recording. So,
which is a lot.
It's a lot. It should be more than enough for most practical uses. If that's not for you and you don't want to use that module, we will be building a CF Express slot adapter.
So a CF Express slot is basically sort of one of these, but where it has these two logos here on the side, it will just be two card slots going in. Yeah, that makes sense.
Then you'll naturally have a ceiling to the write speeds of those.
Any idea how much of a hit that will be?
To be found. Yeah. Again, the technologies for those third-party medias are advancing and moving forwards, and we have a qualified list, and we work with the guys that are making external media, but it will be a different level. When we're using PCI connected NVMe M.2 media, it's rapid in terms of how quickly it can work and write.
Now, I've had quite a lot of questions coming in about getting the media off the camera. So that while we're talking about the media drive, that's probably something be good to talk through. James says, will you release a more desktop style dock for the new memory module? So something that isn't rack based. Great products, by the way. Love the announcements. Yeah. Alamox says, what +1 request for a more desktop dock for the more new memory upgrades? I think that is, I saw a lot of people asking, is there any way of doing it? Because the media dock for it is big, and it's 3 bays in it. It looks fast, but it's big.
Full rack. We were showing it again, and the intention and the thinking around it was DIT, in terms of you might be multicam, you might be on set, and the need to quickly data wrangle and manage multiple cameras. So 3 docks into then maybe a cloud store with very high transfer rates over 10 gig or 100 gig capability on those boxes is at probably the top of data management and what you'd be doing with it. Sure. very common feature request. The time I spent at NAB talking to customers about it was a single dock option.
Yep.
Something that might be USB-C based, so you could just have almost like a sled.
Yeah.
So certainly the camera team have taken that back as feedback, and that'd be something possibly to look at. But actually, one of the practical understanding of how you could use this camera is you probably never need to take the media out.
Which is a real mental adjustment
Yeah.
for people. It certainly would be for me. The idea of having a media drive in your camera that you just never take out
Yeah.
is a bit foreign. So let's discuss that.
Okay, so partly again the price of the media. If you want to buy a second unit, these are going to be about £3,000.
Yeah.
So that's quite expensive in terms of operational cost for people. But they're there if you need them, and,
Sure.
and you want that reliability or that redundancy. But what you have on the camera is a 10 gig e-port.
Yeah.
So we can connect the camera back into a network, and then we have a REST API capability where we could manage the media off the camera.
Gotcha.
So if you're between setups, if you're between takes, or however else you have a breakdown on set, you could have somebody data wrangling or a production assistant that's interrogating the media on camera and then pulling those files off.
So rather than, okay, so we've shot a scene, we're pausing, the DP's coming in to light the next scene, DIT wants to get media off the camera, rather than taking that drive out and somebody running it over to the DIT station to dump it, you'd leave that entirely alone, and the person would run the other way with an Ethernet cable, jam it into the back of the camera.
Or if it allows, the Ethernet cable could stay in the camera, and your
Fair.
production
Yep.
assistant, your
Fair
DITs could actually be working across it. It allows you then to effectively use the camera as the dock, which is it's not a new concept. Many other camera systems have this, but certainly with the data file sizes, the transfer, as people are saying, that media dock might be something that is something a little bit more expensive than they'd want.
Sure.
It allows you to manage and choose how you want to use the data, how you're going to work with the camera.
And 10G is fast enough to be doing that, right? I mean, that's faster than a USB dock would be, isn't it?
Well, it again depends on the file size, depends on the format you shot,
Yeah.
how quickly whatever data you're trying to move around. If you were trying to completely remove 8 terabytes, that's hours and hours of data transfer. But if you're managing scenes and shots and takes as you're going, it's certainly manageable in terms of bringing data off the camera.
I guess the comparison is if I've got a Thunderbolt into my MacBook with a CF Express card in it, and that's the media workflow that I'm used to using, which is the media workflow I'm used to using, is that 10G over Ethernet onto my laptop faster than?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be in terms of data rate.
Nice. But that does still require you to have a computer with a 10G Ethernet port, unless you've got other 10G Ethernet infrastructure like a docking system or something like that, which is pretty accessible. If you don't, what are your options?
Well, workstation management. Our solution would be whatever your PC or Windows workstation management or of choice would be, and then Blackmagic Cloud Store. So then you can stay at those data rates. So you're not using USB-based media, that then becomes a bottleneck. If you use Blackmagic Cloud Stores or some of the new Cloud Store Max products, again, you've got that transfer capability. Those Cloud Store products then have the ability to link directly to post. So what you're creating is a media management tool which goes directly from camera through file to DIT or data wrangling, production assistant side, then connects into your Blackmagic Cloud, which can be linked through Blackmagic Cloud Store hardware into your DaVinci Resolve projects.
And that's over the Wi-Fi, these two antennas.
Slightly different technology with the Wi-Fi. So yeah, the camera has Wi-Fi capability. The antennas come with the kit, so it's built into the product. The Wi-Fi would allow you to have that connectivity, but certainly for full Blackmagic RAW size files, it's going to be very slow compared to 10 gig. The camera does shoot proxies. So you have a HD H.264 proxy recorded for every clip. You could do the same workflow and have a proxy workflow via Wi-Fi if you wanted to the camera. So that again would give you the camera to cloud workflow, but around a proxy system that allows post to carry on working and maybe doing your offlines or maybe dailies prep through those offline files, and then conform to the full file versions if you want as well. The camera will also stream as SRT built into the camera. So if you wanted to, you could stream from the camera for monitoring capability. So then there's some options there in terms of how is the camera being sent maybe to production or direction or first AD positions. And then the third use of the Wi-Fi would be control. So again, early in the camera's life, but our intention would be to use the Wi-Fi as a control interface. So you could have production control or menu setup or media control into the camera via Wi-Fi as well. Very
cool, but not just yet. That's coming.
Some of it will work. This particular one doesn't even have the media software.
Yeah, sure. No, this is very early. Yeah. Okay, cool. And I guess if you want to simplify that even further and just try and get as far back to that more traditional workflow as you can, there's the CF Express media module thing, or can you just plug the camera in over USB?
Yes, so down on the right-hand side of the camera on the top, there's multiple USB-C ports.
Gotcha.
Not active on the prototype, but that will give you external USB-C recording in due course as well.
In its most simplistic way of getting media off, you could just plug a USB-C cable in directly to the camera.
Exactly as you've seen on micro camera, pocket cameras, so those functions on there as well.
Now, I guess an important part of that is when you plug in that 10G Ethernet cable, which sounds like one of the preferred ways of getting it off without one of those big media docks. What happens to the rest of the camera while it's being accessed by the DIT? Is the rest of the camera fully operational? It
would be operational. You've got playback capability on the camera as well, so you could be pulling data away, and on the actual LCD you could be reviewing it. You could, in theory, be recording while somebody's taking away recorded clips.
Right.
Possibly not ideal in terms of the amount of read and write data that's happening on the media, but in practical sense you could do that. You wouldn't be able to take clips that are being recorded because you'd need to close that file header out before you could actually make that media visible on the network. So that would be a limitation. But it does give you production and capable ways of managing the media on the camera itself.
Sure. Okay, great.
So if you want to move around the camera, I guess
let's do some more moving around.
Towards the back, an element on there as well, just to say what you have. You've got two 12 gig SDIs on output. There's no SDI input on this camera. So
like the Ursa broadcast.
Exactly, yeah. Now we have always had an SDI input for camera return and control and ATEM integration. This is not designed to be used for live production. This is a digital film camera, so we don't have an SDI in. You've got 12 gig SDI or dual outputs, obviously for providing monitoring capability, reference and timecode input on there as well. Another key difference is the battery system on this, and obviously we've been speaking about this. So we're now using B-mount.
Yes.
Standard battery platform for digital filmmakers, 24 volt standard. In terms of what we can actually use on the camera as well. So the camera itself is power hungry in terms of its performance and capability, but also then 24 volt B-mount as a digital film standard means that we're stepping into what people will be more practically aware of.
So that's the back of the camera by itself. As you can see, it's a B-mount with a little 2-pin Lemo at the top as well for an output.
And then on the front of the camera, keep moving them around, sorry. We've also now got external connections. We have a 7-pin Lemo on your right-hand side.
Here we go.
And a 3-pin Fisher.
Yep.
So standard connectivity off the front of the camera for accessories, follow focus motors, control systems. We can send in stop-start control if we wanted to the camera. Rangefinder or other devices that want to be monitored or powered off those can be done as well. They're 24 volt, 2 amp shared on there, so it's very high power output in terms of accessories that you'd want to use from a digital film platform as well on the camera. So the power system around the camera is very much orientated to people who are going to be building out this as a camera package with third-party accessories for what they need.
And B-mount is a relatively new battery system. There are quite a few manufacturers doing it. These are the SWIT ones, which are some of our favourite ones. There's a range of them, including hot swap plates, all the rest of it. But these are chunky. Yeah. These are definitely pro batteries. What was the reasoning for going with B-mount on this?
The power draw of the camera in terms of the power use and the watt hours that we can draw.
Do we know what that is?
It's around 80 watts in terms of base unit for the camera. It's variable. If you're drawing full power output off the front, then 2 amps at 24 volts. You could be pulling 48 watts depending on your accessories, probably not that much, but the camera can go naturally higher into 130, 140 watts of power output if needed. Again, it's a little substation as a camera platform when you start adding accessories in the way that you might be working with it.
Gotcha. And do you have to use B mount, or is there other battery options that you can use with
It
the
will
camera?
ship with B mount. We will be doing a V-lock option and a gold mount option as well. One of the common questions we had, and you might be getting it, is about what happens if you use lower voltage batteries on the camera.
Yeah. So V-lock as a standard for people is 14.4 volts. There are V-locks available that will do bi voltage or go up to the higher voltages, similar to B mount, but those are specific V-locks.
Yeah.
And often have some safety requirements, like Switz option, for example, uses these little magic stickers that it needs to recognise to feed the power to avoid overpowering a camera and damaging things. So it's not perfect for something like this. But so if you were using the V mount with a high power V mount, like one of those higher 26 volt ones, everything would work perfectly fine?
The camera would work perfectly fine. Some of the performance of the camera would be restricted. So as you put a V-lock battery on at 14.4 volts, for example, then maybe...
Oh, at 14 point... What about a higher wattage, higher voltage?
High voltage would be fine if you're matching those B mounts, if that's an option. If you go into the lower standard 14.4, then some of the performance of the camera would reduce in terms of the power draw needed for the features. So that could be higher frame rate performance, it could be high resolution performance.
But we don't know what that actually is yet.
Haven't had it confirmed from the engineers yet as to what those sort of ceilings would be. Also, naturally, talking about your output on the front LEMO and Fisher connections, the available power outage through those connectors would drop as well.
Oh, sure, yeah. You'd probably lose most of your power outputs, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Another thing to point out in terms of new for the camera is the Ursa Cine EVF that you can see on the camera.
I've got it up on this lovely long EVF extension arm that you've got. You obviously don't have to have this ridiculously nice long arm, but this is quite something.
Yeah, some I don't know, many first ADs or DOPs prefer to have the EVF right at the back of the camera, particularly if you're sat on a dolly, for example, you'd be seated behind the camera.
Yeah, sure.
It's a new rig and mounting system, so it's a lot more versatile in terms of locking, really high quality in terms of design and the functionality of it. The EVS itself is a new micro OLED, so full color, very high precision. The design of it is now a little bit more compact and lightweight, and there are 3 function buttons that you can program in the camera. So you might want false color or peaking or whatever your preference is. You can add those in a new menu that we put in. Key difference here as well, though, is we're using USB-C. So the connect to the EVF from the camera is USB-C for data and for display and power.
Makes sense.
So it gives us a much more versatile sort of control in terms of what we're offering. And as we speak as well, we'll show it later, when we look at the Pyxis, you'll be able to use the same EVF with Pyxis as well.
Just while we mentioned the Pyxis, just as a quick little time check, we're 10 minutes over the sort of allotted hour. Now we're not limited to time on this, but we obviously want to mention the Pyxis because that's also a very exciting camera, and we haven't even got to it yet. And there's also another third camera after that as well. So just quickly on the Ursa Cine, because there's a load here that we haven't talked about. One question that came in, which I quite liked, was about weight. Do we know how heavy the actual body of the camera actually is?
Just under 4 kilos.
And how does that compare to the previous 12K and the Ursa Minis?
A little bit heavier. It's actually a little bit broader and longer as a camera as well. So in the photography, it looks like the same sort of rugby ball shaped Ursa system, but it's actually just a little bit chunkier.
And Seth says, is it possible to work in the Cine 12K's menus simultaneously from the flip-out screen and the fixed screen on the opposite side?
Yes.
So if I go into the menus on this side, if we zoom into that, guys, you can see on this side of the camera, I have got menus, and on this side of the camera, I have got full image control, and I'm shooting and operating, and that's the same through the viewfinder as well, but while my assistant is over here.
Last thing for me probably to say around the Ursa is actually that side screen.
Yes.
So we've taken away the rosette mount that you've seen on Ursa Mini Pro, Ursa 12K, and we've replaced it with a second screen that we would call the production assistant screen. This gives you, as you just shown, all the functional capability of the main operator screen. One of the really important elements we've added is a new lens control overlay. It isn't working with this lens typically, and it's not fully functional on the demo, but what we have is a system which would recognize the lenses as you add them, and we run an AI program that if it doesn't know the lens, let's say with the iris, you fully close it, it analyzes obviously the light intensity coming through, and as you open it, it will map the lens against T-stop and then build the UI. And you can see on the graphic what it would look like in terms of focal range as well. You draw the lens all the way home and then go out to your furthest distance, and it will draw out the graphic, allowing your production assistant or focus puller to then use that as a software guide, and you can add markers if you need to run stop to stop on the lens, rather than say if you're not using physical stop guides on the focus follow focus itself.
Which is very, very cool. And this does require a PL lens with Cook eye data, though,
with eye data currently, yeah. And it remembers the lens by serial number. So if you take that lens off the camera and bring it back, it remembers what you did with it last time.
Okay. But if you're hiring an Atlas Mercury, like in that picture, they're from a rental company, and you've got 2 different serial number ones on different shoots, you put the second one that you've hired on, it won't necessarily remember that it's a...
No, and then you just do the quick scan through both iris and focal range, and it will build the UI for you. And again, testing this at NAB with multiple lenses we had on booth, it was very accurate in its recognition.
Oh, interesting. A bunch of little questions about autofocus, and people saying, nope, there's no autofocus.
No.
One quick little off-brand point on that is that also NAB DJI launched their new Focus Pro follow focus kit, which is a LiDAR focus system which would put a little LiDAR receiver on there or below the lens and give you full wireless follow focus control, but also autofocus on any camera, any cinema lens with that, which is a really exciting technology, because all of a sudden every camera platform that has been made that hasn't had autofocus in it now has autofocus. It's a I think it's about £1,000 ex VAT. There's a couple of different versions of it, so it's not cost prohibitive for a buyer of this kind of system. And if you really want autofocus with this camera, there you go.
And to be tested. So we were looking at that at the show, which is fantastic technology. We've tried Arian C motion follow focus systems and built those on, and they would be compatible.
Oh, of course.
But then new technologies coming through. I'd love to get hold of those and see what they look like. But I think they would be a brilliant addition to this as a camera system.
Absolutely. Okay. Let me just see if there's any other. One nice little point, Rec Media said, would we ever see a more stripped back solo operator version of the Cine 12K? I feel like this price is perfect for solo camera owners and the capabilities, but I guess, this is designed to be a work as a crew kind of camera, I guess feature request of a solo operator one.
I could imagine you could use it as solo operator in terms of functionality. It's a camera that's designed to be a system, so it's not going to go on your shoulder necessarily, but it could be rigged out for a camera up. It could be on gimbals, for example, but it's on the heavy side.
Yes, it is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit more feature. This side panel is more designed for camera operators. But there's not that much here. It wouldn't be that much more unwieldy to use as a solo operator than an Ursa Mini Pro would
not
be.
At all.
All of the controls are still on this side. You've still got the vast majority that you're used to over here. And you just got a bonus screen on the side, which in some situations, an interview or whatever, if you're sat on that side of the camera, is actually really useful.
Yeah, for us, it's probably the other way. We would expect people would feel comfortable using it as a single operator, but we've built out production tools for a camera team. So when you have the camera as a platform that multiple people have got responsibilities around it, whether that's production assistant taking off the media, focus puller or first AD on one side and then camera operator on the other, it's a camera system that could be scaled up into those filmmaking requirements rather than people being concerned that it's too complex to use as a single user.
One more little question from G&K Studios. Will there be a list of lenses that qualify for full resolution on the Ursa Cine? I can't imagine there's too many lenses that can take advantage of that level of resolution. It's a fair comment. I think you would be surprised at just how good modern optics are. There is a huge variety of lenses on the market, some that are very, very sharp and detailed, some that are much more vintagey in aesthetics. I think you'd be surprised at just how much resolving power there is in those sort of lenses at all price points. The other thing I would just add to that is I'm quite a big fan of having a high resolution, high detailed, clean sensor, and then adding interesting things to sort of soften that image and craft that image and choose the look for the project with the lens and the filtration rather than doing it in the camera sensor. So I can absolutely see a lot of people using this and not caring that it's not resolving the full 12K. It doesn't really matter that much. What matters is I've got the right look and craft for my project. So I think I certainly wouldn't treat this as a camera that you could only use very supreme primes on. This you can absolutely use normal lenses like these ones on the table here in front of us.
Seen. Yeah, and at that high end as well, the camera does have an optical low pass filter, which just helps in terms of that. If there's any aliasing or moire with those high frequency elements that you might get, so then that's naturally balanced through the lens itself.
Right, are there any more things we want to talk about on this, or should we talk about the Pyxis, which is the next exciting little camera?
Unless you have questions, we can jump to Pyxis.
No, I think I've gone through most of the questions. If I've missed anyone's questions, I'm sorry. Let's get on with the Pyxis.
Cool. Okay. And conscious of time, Pyxis for us is a camera that will come next in the summer.
Yes,
after
this is coming this month.
Yeah.
Pyxis June.
Yeah. So, and we were showing it at NAB as a sister product, if you will. So we have obviously Ursa Cine as our high-end digital filmmaker product. Pyxis is an evolution, if you will, of the pocket camera systems, and we know that we've worked through a range of pocket cameras in terms of capability and resolution and performance over the past couple of years. We announced the Cinema Camera 6K at the end of last year. That was our first camera system that was open gate in terms of that full frame format and offering somebody or filmmakers something beyond Super 35. Immediately we knew that people were going to say, can we get a box camera?
I mean, it was my first thought. In that live stream with Grant, where he brought it out from underneath the table, as soon as he brought it out, I was like, oh, I wish it was this shape.
Yeah, and now, knowing how long it takes to develop cameras, this was in the background.
I'm sure, yes. You didn't make this in 6 months.
We're not that good. So we were always developing a new camera platform which would fit between pocket, and there's a place for pocket in terms of handheld and what that can be, and then obviously the Cine products at the higher end with the Ursa, and then Pyxis comes in for us as a new solution that we feel addresses a lot of the expectations to some degree, which is a great thing to have. People look at us and want us to build certain products and technologies, and the Pyxis comes and does that. It's utilizing the same sensor as the Cinema Camera 6K, so it's a 6K resolution, it's full frame, it's open gate. We have 3 body models. There'll be an L mount, a PL, and an EF model. And if you know as well, looking at the Cinema Camera 6K, it's dual ISO and 13 stops of dynamic range. So it's a very capable sensor in terms of cinema production and performance.
Yeah, I mean, let's chat a little bit about that sensor. I mean, it's a beautiful sensor. It was your first large format sensor. In fact, some of the footage from behind it is running behind me on the screen over there. It does have very nice dynamic range, and 13 stops versus 16 stops on this, so it's definitely a step backwards from what this one sounds like it's capable of doing. I would add that you guys are perhaps one of the more I don't want to say trustworthy, that sounds really bad on the other brands, but you know, when you say 13 stops or 16 stops, I'd expect that to be fairly accurate with what people are actually seeing on the cameras. Yeah,
we're pragmatic in terms of what we mean. And then again, speaking around it in Resolve, we've also then got highlight recovery capability in Resolve. So,
and you don't use that when you're measuring the quoted dynamic range of the cameras?
No, so that could, for instance, on the Cine camera, add another stop and half
Yeah.
take that past 16, 17 stops, and then
Which is
likewise
crazy.
with the Pyxis camera, we'd expect to be able to then maybe push that towards 14 stops or something like that, depending on what you've shot and what highlight capability there is.
Yep.
In terms of it being open gate, example here in terms of some sensor modes. Now, different to the Cine camera where we have scaling, there are crops.
Yes, because this does not use the RGB technology.
So this is a standard Bayer sensor for us. OpenGate gives us obviously really fantastic full frame capability, but then depending on what format and resolution aspect ratio you want to shoot in, just be aware of certain compromises that will come in terms of crop and then scale.
Sure.
So your lens choices might be modified or changed. Principally, that should be determined by what's your output resolution. So if you want to shoot 4K DCI, as the example there is, you know you'll be cropping in. If you prefer to shoot full frame L mount lenses, for example, open gate, you can shoot fully wide on those, and then you could probably crop, pan and scan, and do what you want to do in post as an alternative.
Yep.
That's your choice as an owner-operator of the product, but it is a different scenario than we said within camera sensor scaling.
Sure. One quick little question. Alamox says, does Pyxis include an OLPF? I think James is saying below that it does.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Nice.
In terms of the body design, if you want to look at that, sadly don't have one here. All the ones that were with us at NAB have gone home.
Yes, I'm very sad about that.
Yeah, unfortunately. Small, lightweight, L mount, as I say on this one. The viewfinder USB-C is on the front port as well.
Yep. So this viewfinder that we've seen here on thing works entirely just as well across that.
Absolutely, yeah, and will. On the production side...
Thinking about it, can you use that with the older
No.
cameras at all? It's just these two?
Just the two new cameras in terms of the display port capability of the USB-C that we're using. On the side of the camera, again, we're using Blackmagic OS. It's the same menu systems, the touchscreen control, video reference, button mapping as well, and some function button capability.
Now let's chat about this screen. So this is a 5-inch?
Yes.
5-inch touchscreen LCD, much like sort of these flip-out ones that we've seen on cameras, all in the back of a pocket, but it is fixed, attached on the side of the camera. So obviously, as a like in that photograph shows, as a touchscreen menu, makes perfect sense. What a fantastic way to operate the camera. As a tool to view your image is a bit strange placement. What's the thinking there? How do you recommend people use the camera and monitor the camera?
Again, where the EVF comes in. So you're absolutely right. If this camera is likely to be rigged and mounted, it could be on a gimbal or some sort of stabilizer. It might be on the end of a jib arm. Depends what you're doing with it. USB-C output for the viewfinder is your first option. You've then got SDI in the back if you want, so you could take that to monitoring, or you could have top-based monitors as well. You could place a Blackmagic Video Assist. If they're a little bit too big, you could go for a smaller, I don't know, a small HD product or something like that on the product itself. The question naturally I was asked around this was why it didn't have an articulating screen, as the other cameras do. That's a design choice. We from a fork in the road really is to go, if you go down that route, what would that be? Or do you keep it as a small compact box? Adding an articulation would add cost, it would add weight, it would unbalance the camera to some degree as well. So the choice was made to keep the aesthetic of the camera about a small, robust, lightweight, compact camera that can be mounted and modified as needed, and then your off-board monitoring is the choice of the operator, whether that's EVF or off-board screens.
Gotcha. On the topic of off-board screens, I did see a couple of questions on that. Absolute WP says, I've heard rumours that the Video Assist will be able to control the Pyxis. Is this true?
It's true there's rumours.
Oh,
Right. It was a very highly requested point and a discussion at NAB, and we've had it previously. I've had conversations with the guys that are the product management team of Video Assist, and they're keen to look at that, shall we say.
Alamox also says, can we dare hope for an expanded range of accessories for the Pyxis, like a 5-inch or 7-inch touchscreen monitor for the USB interface? I mean, that essentially, I guess, like a Video Assist.
I think so, yeah.
But stripped back, I guess, no recording.
Yeah, I can't promise and wouldn't want to talk about potentials in the future, but certainly what we have with Pyxis is a new camera system for us. So we would want to build capable accessories, listen to what people want to do in terms of the work that they have around the camera, and then build the most suitable solutions for them.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people chiming in on that one. I think that would be a USB-C using that same system as the
monitor system
to go on the top of the camera as a little flip-out screen, or not flip-out screen, external monitor would be, I think, very popular. Very popular. Interesting question from Difter. There was a rosette adapter listed on B&H as one of the accessories for the Ursa Cine 12K. Any insight as to how that might work, considering the right side of the camera is so crowded already? Now, there's a rosette adapter for the Pyxis.
There is. I'm not sure if that's
for the
a
12K.
mistake.
I think that might be a mistake from our friends at B&H.
So yeah, on the right-hand side of the camera, there's a mounting plate system. You'll get with the camera a blank side plate. And you'll get a USB-C device, like a Velcro strap, so that could be a phone or it could be a USB-C. So
they come with the camera?
Those two do. The rosette plate you can see there is additional.
N1.
Yeah, that's, I think, about £45.
Okay.
That third option...
Which I think would be a fantastic thing to add, because, you know, one of those little small rig or tilter wooden hand grips on the side of this camera would be really nice to use.
So you can buy that and you'd have those options on the side of the camera. We also know there's been a lot of interest from third-party rig manufacturers for the designs and dimensions of this product, so they can build and support as they'd want to as well. So, like, as with the monitoring, we know that there's probably going to be a lot more accessories we can talk about around Pyxis. And as you can see there, the top handle, the rail mounting and the EVF are all from the Ursa Cine range, and you can use those on the Pyxis. The actual base plate in this image is from the studio cameras. So the Ursa Cine base plates won't work with this camera, they're too big. But something like the studio base plate would, if you want to then mount that.
And I'm sure we will see a lot of third-party options. I imagine people will design a cage for the camera which replaces the top handle, gives you a new mounting point for the EVF, attaches on to that plate accessory bit that goes down the side with new bits in it, and then becomes a base plate underneath as well. I mean, it's a dream for, you know, rigging companies like Tilter, Condor Blue, Small Rig, Tangerine, that kind of company.
Absolutely. And again, going back to why we built it as a cube. Keep it small, compact, all the functionalities inside the device and product. Allow people to use it and build it out. You know, we've described it as the most riggable box camera available in terms of the mounting points, the accessories, the side plate option that gives third parties the ability to customize it for customers based on what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's so scalable depending on what you need. If you want to use it effectively like a pocket with just a little screen on the top, you can do that. If you want to rig it to be a big shoulder mount, you can do that. If you want to use it on a crane arm and all the rest of it, you can do that.
However you want to.
It makes so much sense being in this form factor. I think this is exactly the kind of design that
absolutely and lightweight, a couple of pounds in weight. So
yes, absolutely.
Very small.
Yeah.
And then as you see there, 3 lens mount options, as I said. The L mount and the EF are £2,500 pounds, which, for the cost of the product, is a very capable digital film camera. The PL is a little bit more expensive. I think it's about £150 more expensive for the PL version if you want it.
Now, these lens mounts are not interchangeable between the 3 of those. No. You choose the lens mount at purchase, and there's no way of changing that. Even sending it back to you to get it changed, there's no way to change it.
They're a locked mechanism.
So, I mean, PL, I guess to me, if you're going to use it alongside one of these on a proper production with PL mounts, that makes perfect sense. It will be much more strong and reliable than an L mount with a PL adapter or something like that. As an owner-operator, I mean, the L mount one seems to make the most sense.
I think so. And going back to when we introduced the Cinema Camera 6K, we joined the L mount alliance with Leica and with the other guys within that, and it was a platform we stepped into. It was the first time we'd used that mount on the cameras for our first time as a full format system. I think EF and PL recognised the range and the vast amount of lenses that digital filmmakers are using, so we give the option. But just unfortunately with this camera system, it isn't interoperable. It's not going to be changeable between the models.
Now, on that screen, we can also see the XLR port on the front. We did have a question from Tim saying, really dislike the mini XLR port position on Pyxis, would rather have a LEMO port there for lens motors, like on the Ursa Cine. Why is the XLR port there, and is that the only audio interface on the camera?
It's the only audio interface on the camera itself. It comes down to considering that you might just have a top mic and then
Sure.
it just drops to the front of the camera from a design point of view. Also, there was a previous slide I didn't use which shows you the back to some degree of the camera itself, where CF Express, it uses BPU batteries from Sony. There wasn't a lot of space on the product. When you start to make a smaller, more compact camera, unfortunately, one of the compromises was about the audio interface on the camera.
And there's no 3.5mm input then. There's the 3.5 headphone jack, but there's no 3.5 in.
No.
Okay.
So that then is Pyxis, and I think when we get more of the product and when it's available to us, be an opportunity to come back and talk about it more and show
I'm so
the full
excited to be
capability.
using it. Absolutely.
What that brings us to then probably as a closeout is the third camera that was announced, and more of a technical pitch.
Yeah, I mean, when Grant announced this in that stream, bear in mind we'd already been watching it by 2.5 hours. My first thought was it was some sort of an April Fool's joke. I mean, this next camera, it seemed too good to be true.
Yeah.
It seemed believable.
Yeah. This camera's in development. We're expected to see it at the end of the year. And again, it's taking the technology of what can we do with the Ursa Cine product. We have a 12K camera, and we want to take that to the next step. And that is going towards 65mm. So we've announced, and we will have a 17K variant, which will be a sensor of 50mm by 23mm in terms of physical dimension size. It will be 17K in pixel, and it is still based around our RGBW system. It's effectively the 12K sensor pulled out to match. You can see in terms of its scale what it will offer. Our intention with this camera is that we can bring IMAX capable or IMAX level digital filmmaking down into a creative price point, where IMAX currently is a very niche end of the market. It might seem very out there that you do it. There's the specialist applications. We were in Las Vegas, and naturally anyone's there would have seen the Sphere, this fantastic, crazy new venue. That kind of technology was shot with sensors of this size. Again, going into specialist AV, documentary filmmaking, or narrative filmmaking with IMAX.
Obviously, the Sphere is a very attention-grabbing example of this, but incredibly small market. What is a much larger market is VFX walls, and one, shooting on them, but also shooting the plates to be used on those, because some of them are Unreal Engine sort of virtual environments behind actors on LED walls. Some of it is real capture plates from around the world. I mean, this would be a perfect.
Absolutely, yeah. We've worked on a number of productions where the on-set has been virtual production LED walls, and I think there's examples on our website. Our Flag Means Death with HBO. The guys that were the visual effects team took multiple 12K cameras on a rig so that they could get something like a 270 degree panoramic. Wow. Took a boat out into the Gulf of Mexico and filmed real oceans at different times of the day, brought that back, stitched it together with Unreal Engine and project it onto the virtual production sets. 17K lends itself to how do you bring virtual production and those real elements together if they're new cinema filmmaking tools, and integrate Blackmagic into those as well.
Alamox says, all my lenses are crying big manly tears at that 17K sensor size.
Yeah.
Tim says, super excited by the 65mm 17K. Amazing achievement. Next step, 1570 IMAX sensor size. Would that be 24K? So I guess adding the virtual height. Vertical height. Yeah, that would be quite something.
It could. Let us get this one done first.
Yeah, one step at a time. One impossible camera at a time, please.
Yeah, and again, it's a technical statement to go, this is where we're going. People that have watched us develop digital filmmaking cameras, we're still quite young in this market. We've only been making these cameras for 12 years.
And this is something nobody else is really doing.
No, but we want to push that technology as far as we can in terms of we know that the demand is out there for these tools. We don't compromise, as I said previously, in terms of the image fidelity, colour precision that we bring through into post-production. And this is just another statement in terms of where we were going to go from a digital filmmaking side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a massive technology statement. Yeah. Okay, well, shall I just run through a couple of quick-fire questions that got missed just before we wrap up. So let's just go through these really quickly. Royal Child says, any possibilities for a V-mount Pyxis version? Because BPU is the camera, right?
Yeah, possibly with an external plate, I would have thought, where you could have an umbilical.
Lots of like Hawkwoods and people will make a extension plate at the back. I would have thought that'd be quite difficult to make though, because the placement of the CF Express cards and the SDI ports might get in the way of that a little bit.
Yeah, not. It's possible. It wouldn't be something I don't think we would do.
And what I would say is that BPU, you know, there are some really good third-party BPU batteries, like Swit make them, that are 90 watt-hour with USB-C in and out, so that you can charge them off USB-C and power some accessories at the same time.
And they're 14.4 standards.
Exactly. And they'll last for hours.
Yeah, and we stepped up again where we've been using MPF battery styles for pocket cameras, because they had to be small to fit in the body of the camera. You
compare this to the Cinema Camera 6K, you're going to be able to run it for probably 5 times as long off of one of those Swit BPU batteries on the back, compared to a little MPF that slots into the 6K.
Absolutely right.
Okay, GNK is asked a couple of times about will Blackmagic release a new remote hand grip with more features? A bit off topic, but I think that's something he'd really like to see.
We have a new Cine camera system. I haven't shown it on here, but the information will be on our website for the Ursa Cine. So these are sort of like front bull bars that you could have if it was shoulder mounted. There's a stop-start record option on that, which goes into the 3-pin Fisher connection on the front of the camera. That's the only accessory right now that has that kind of external remote. It has Bluetooth, so there are Bluetooth phone-based and app-based controls you can put into the camera. And then, as we said before, there's potential for external control via the Wi-Fi, and maybe future USB-C based monitor controls as we start to build out the accessories on both Ursa Cine and Pyxis.
Gotcha. Ray asks, will the Pyxis user manual be available on the Blackmagic website? Presumably that will come when the camera's finished.
I imagine it's still being written whilst they're still working out all the ins and outs and the menus.
Absolutely. Let's see, I think I've answered all of those. James says it's really an achievement to have an IMAX style camera that's actually purchasable. Arian IMAX only lets you rent. Like I said, this is just something nobody else is doing with that 65mm sensor. Nebula says, will the 17K have similar rolling shutter to the 12K Cine? Have they said anything on that? I mean, it uses the same RGBW technology.
Too early to be precise, but it is built around the same technologies. So as we were speaking about earlier, we would expect it to be able to push the rolling shutter performance to where it needs, you know, where people want it to be.
Slightly cheeky one from Alamok saying, props to Blackmagic Design for finally delivering on the sensor capability promises that Red made 10 to 15 years ago. Slightly cheeky. I'm sure you can comment.
You for that.
Tim says 275 watt-hour B mount on Alexa 35 gets 2.5 hours of life. So would that track for the Ursa Cine 12K? What is the power draw and battery life on the Ursa Cine? Yes, this one that we had on it, which is a 290 watt-hour, was saying just over 3
hours, was it?
Hours when it was new on there, and it's been running the majority of the day, and it's still on 30%.
And it might have we mentioned earlier that the camera as a base kind of level is 80 watts.
80 watts-ish.
So it's power draw is higher than other camera systems that we have, but it's obviously drawing a lot more because it's doing more.
Seth is saying, going back to the Cine 12K, Grant said in the live stream that Blackmagic Design's colour science is now in the camera as well. What does that mean? Can you expand on that?
It relates to how we use Blackmagic RAW and that image process pipeline. So Blackmagic Colour Science Gen 5, to give it its title in terms of what we've developed, is again an idea or what we've taken from all of the colour IP and the technology that we have in DaVinci Resolve from a colour grading heritage, and building an image pipeline that goes almost backwards through the camera. This is something we've always done as a camera technology company. Other camera companies may look at the sensor first and then try and work out how they get that off the back. We've always looked at what can we bring into DaVinci Resolve, almost highest quality out of the camera possible, the Colour Science Gen 5 is part of the technology in the image pipeline, part of Blackmagic Raw, part of DaVinci Resolve in how we demosaic and how we manage colour science and the fidelity and the uniformity of the colour that we have from camera sampling into Resolve finishing.
Yeah. Excellent. And then last question, James is saying, what was the reason for fixed mount on the Pyxis via versus adjustable mounts like the Ursa? I imagine it would have been to get L mount onto the Pyxis, right? Because you can't really do L mount in an adjustable system like that.
And I also think maybe from a practical point of view that the price and the body and the size again of the Pyxis, it's more natural to have a fixed camera lens option and the mount to be fixed, whereas the Ursa Cine, the changeable interoperable lens mounts are going to be more practical for people that are owning and operating those cameras.
And I said that was the last question, but Darnell's just reminded me of one I missed, was will L mounts lenses from third-party brands work with stabilization on the Pyxis? You're part of the L mount allowance now, right? So, you know, if an L mount has stabilization in it, from whether it's from Lumix or from Sigma or whoever, it will power that stabilization on the camera, right?
It should go through the lens, on the power connectors.
Fantastic. Okay, let's drag myself away from the questions there. Thank you so much for that, and we've gone nearly a whole hour over, so thank you so much for giving up so much of your time to answer people's questions today. It really, really is appreciated.
No, I enjoyed that. We could keep going, but I guess
we could
if we need to stop,
we could do. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and it goes without saying, if you want to pre-order any of these products, head over to ProAV. Everything's available to purchase and pre-order there, or of course just talk to our sales team. If you have any questions as well, a lot of people will be watching this after the fact, so if you leave any questions down in the comment section down below, we'll do our best to answer them for you and keep up to date with that. But yeah, I'm so excited to actually get full working samples and start using them. They're really quite impressive launches, let alone all the stuff we didn't really have time to talk about today.
I know, it's too much. We'll come back, maybe look at Ursa Cine. I'm excited to see what people do with it, and then the Pyxis camera I think is just going to be absolutely amazing once we get hold of that. I'm really excited to use that.
Absolutely. Right, thank you so much for your time, mate.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Bye.